forcing Speaker Johnson's hand on the Epstein investigation. In a major escalation tonight, the Attorney General of Arizona and Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva of Arizona are suing Mike Johnson. And they're suing him because Grijalva has not been sworn in. So what does all this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Because it does at its heart. Grijalva is the final vote needed for a bipartisan maneuver called a discharge petition that goes around Johnson. Because he does not want a vote to release the full Epstein files. This would go around him, get that vote to release the files. Grijalva was elected in Arizona 28 days ago, a whole month. And Johnson has, in that time, used every excuse not to swear her in. Speaker Johnson has not identified any valid reason for refusing to promptly seat Ms. Grijalva. Instead, on information and belief, Speaker Johnson wishes to delay seating Ms. Grijalva to prevent her from signing a discharge petition that would force a vote on the release of the Epstein files.
My message for Speaker Johnson is clear. Respect the will of the voters, seat Adelita Grijalva, and let her get to work for the Arizonans who elected her.
Last night wasn't just a headline. It was a pressure break. Speaker Mike Johnson tried to hold the door, and Arizona blew it off the hinges. Here's what actually happened. The Arizona Attorney General joined Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva and filed suit because Johnson refused to swear her in, blocking representation for nearly 800,000 Arizonans. And yes, blocking the final signature needed for a bipartisan discharge petition to force a House vote to release the Epstein files. That's the heart of it. You don't have to like the optics. You just have to count the votes. But Mike Johnson didn't. A federal judge looked at the stunt, called it what it was, an abuse of power, and ordered Grijalva seated immediately. That ruling gutted Johnson's leverage on the floor and cracked open the door he was trying to keep bolted. Which is why tonight, the Speaker's allies are scrambling, and the caucus rumor mill is already gaming out what comes after Mike. We're going to unpack exactly how we got here, what this means for the discharge petition, the shutdown, and why this isn't just about one seat. It's about whether the House can be gamed by delay when the public is demanding daylight.
Now, Mr. President, the people of Arizona did their part. They voted. And their representative, Adelita Grijalva, she's been certified. The election's been certified. And they should not have to wait another day to have someone representing them in the House. So we have a message for Speaker Johnson. Do your job. This isn't complicated. It's the basic stuff of being the Speaker of the House. It's the basic things in our democracy, and it should not be impacted by politics. And I'd like to think that every senator here, whether a Democrat or Republican, would agree with that.
Here's the blunt version. Johnson kept inventing reasons not to seat her. Irregularities, process, we're reviewing. None of that is his unilateral call. The Constitution lets the House judge elections, but the House, not the Speaker alone. There are procedures: object, refer, vote. He skipped all of it. He wasn't guarding norms, he was guarding the board. Because with Grijalva in, a bipartisan discharge petition suddenly has the last signature it needs to go around him and put the Epstein files vote on the floor, where he can't bury it in committee. That's why Arizona moved. And that's why the judge moved faster. The judge's language mattered because it stripped away the fog. Constitutionally indefensible isn't DC spin. It's a red stamp that says no legal ground. And when a court says, seat her now, what they're also saying is, you don't get to silence 800,000 people to win a one-day whip count. Johnson lost the legal fight and the optical one simultaneously. You could feel the air change in the Capitol as text chains lit up. Moderates asking counsel, can he even keep doing this? Freedom Caucus asking leadership, what's Plan B if the petition hits 218? Democrats asking staff, what's our floor timing the second she's sworn? Let's not kid ourselves about the strategy. This wasn't about election integrity. If it were, he would have run the contest through the House with a vote. This was about time. Running out the clock so a handful of explosive votes never happen. Epstein transparency, shutdown maneuvering, appropriations riders they can't defend on TV. The math is brutal for Johnson. Every day Grijalva was blocked was a day his margin didn't shrink. Every day after she's seated is a day one more subpoena, one more floor motion, One more discharge petition can rip control from his hands. His choice was power over process. The court's answer was process over power. Now, the ripple effects. First, the discharge petition. It's the constitutional fire alarm members pull when the speaker locks the door. You get the signatures, you force the bill to the floor. Johnson knows that once a transparency bill tied to Epstein hits daylight, his caucus fractures. Libertarians and civil liberties Republicans don't want to be seen as censoring records. Suburban Republicans are done being tied to any whiff of cover-up. Hardliners hate the optics of voting no on sunlight. He was counting on never letting the question be asked. The court just ensured it will be. Second, the shutdown. Negotiations run on leverage and on the perception of leverage. After this ruling, Democrats smell weakness. Moderates smell risk. Johnson smells smoke. You cannot threaten to bottle up the calendar when a federal judge just told the country you bottled up a seat. The speaker needs unity. What he has now is gravity. The longer he resists daylight, the heavier it gets. And it isn't just Democrats circling. Watch the nervous Republicans in Biden-won districts. They've been dying for a pivot point. This ruling gives them cover to say, we believe in the rule of law, we believe in seating duly elected members, and we believe votes deserve daylight. Translation, we're not going down with this ship. If even 5 of them peel off on process votes, committees bleed control, and the rules calendar starts to wobble. That's how speakers fall. Not from one dramatic moment, but from a dozen procedural cuts. Let's talk Arizona politics for a second, because that's the core of the legitimacy argument. Arizonans did their part. Ballots cast, race called, certificate signed. You seat the winner. If there's a real contest, you follow the House contest process. In public. Johnson chose no seat, no vote, no sunlight. That's what made the judge's order so lopsided and the politics so poisonous. Try standing in a shutdown briefing telling families, we're working for you, when you just kept 800,000 voters on mute. Now, the Epstein piece, because that's why this is red hot instead of just Washington hot. There is a bipartisan appetite to force a release regime that maximizes transparency with minimal redaction, paired with a responsible process for genuine victims' privacy. Johnson's problem is simple. Once that vote is public, Republicans will split on it, and the party can't spin that split away. Some will vote yes on sunlight. Some will vote no and spend the next year explaining why. The base doesn't forgive that kind of daylight difference in an election year. So leadership thought they could never allow the vote. The discharge petition says otherwise, and Grijalva's seat is the hinge. Let me be very clear on tone here because this channel is allergic to conspiracy theater. This is not about inventing names. It's about ending a culture of selective secrecy. If there are names, let them be public through a lawful, defensible process. If there are none beyond what's known, then sunlight will prove it. Either way, the public gets closure and the rumor mill dies. That's why this matters beyond the headlines. Sunlight ends the cottage industry of innuendo. Votes end the weaponization of rumor. And courts end speakers inventing new vetoes the Constitution didn't give them. Meanwhile, Johnson's defenders took to the cameras claiming due diligence. That dog won't hunt after a court says seat her now. You can't cite process after skipping it. You can't cite norms after breaking them. Even conservative legal voices are cautioning the Speaker's office. Stop creating appeal-proof losses that weaken the institution you're trying to lead. He needed a narrow procedural win. He delivered a broad constitutional loss. Here's where this goes in the next 72 hours and why the timeline matters. The clerk administers the oath. Grijalva signs the book. Democratic leadership walks the discharge petition to the well with a bipartisan flank so the cameras see the signatures stack. Johnson has 3 choices, all bad. 1. Fight the petition on technicalities and lose in court again. 2. Preemptively calendar a controlled transparency vote and pray the caucus holds. Or 3. Stonewall and force more Republicans to sign, turning a process story into a morality play. Option 2 is the least destructive. Option 3 is a slow-motion collapse. Option 1 is déjà vu in the worst way. There's also the donor class and K Street. Don't sleep on them. Donors can live with almost anything except chaos. This week's ruling screams chaos. The checks that keep a fragile majority solvent start to come with strings. And those strings say stop losing in court, stop bleeding on process, stop looking like you're hiding votes. If the money tilts towards stability Republicans, Johnson's speakership has hours, not months. If the money freezes, his majority has neither the TV buys nor the field to survive the next special. And yes, we asked the unavoidable question. Does the speaker try to retaliate? Strip committees? Jam rules? Punish members who sign? He can try, but retaliation is a sign of dwindling power, not growing power, and it has a way of hardening the very coalition that just beat you. If moderates, libertarians, and Democrats can pass a one-page sunlight bill over the speaker's objections, they can pass a clean CR too. That's why this is bigger than one petition. It's a proof of concept that Johnson is no longer the only gravity in the room. So what should you expect on the House floor when the transparency question finally lands? Expect two speeches that will be replayed for years. One from a Republican who says, "I am a conservative and I am voting for sunlight because the public owns the truth." And one from a Democrat who says, "Transparency with guardrails, redact victims, redact minors, publish the rest." Expect leadership to call it a stunt. Expect the vote to be closer than anyone predicted. Expect members who hid from the cameras this week to be glued to them next week, auditioning for absolution. And expect this line from us, because it's the through line. When power tries to survive by silencing votes, courts get the last word. When power tries to bury sunlight, the public gets the last word. Johnson forgot both. Arizona reminded him. One more thing before we roll out. To every viewer in Arizona who called, wrote, and sued, this is what civic pressure looks like when it works. You didn't just get your representative seated. You forced a constitutional correction that will be cited the next time a leader thinks about locking the door. And to every staffer drafting the transparency text tonight, keep it tight, keep it lawful, keep it humane. No sensationalism, no weaponizing victims. Sunlight and dignity together. That's how you end the rumor economy and return the truth to the people who own it.